I haven't started it yet. There he is. Chris, you good? Mic check.
I'm good.
All right, rock and roll. Ready to start?
Hey, Tammy.
Hey.
All right, ready to go? I'm going to hit start. Everybody will jump on. Hello, hello, friends. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world today. We're thrilled you're here. We got a couple of housekeeping things to take care of before we go ahead and start. I see a bunch of folks are all joining on, and so while we wait for everybody to get on, we'll do a couple of quick FYIs for today. First of all, it's great to see you. If you've been on a webinar with us before, we're thrilled to have you back. If this is your first time either to join ProviderTrust or Virsys12 for one of our sessions, we're thrilled you're here. So thanks for spending the time. Couple of things today. We run this through Zoom. We like to keep this as interactive as possible. And so you'll see in your panel a chat function. If you've got a question, the default response there is you'll chat and all of us panelists will be able to see it. Please go ahead just for the sake of checking audio visual. If you can hear me and see us okay, and you can see our screen, just drop something into the chat, say hello, just so we know, and we'll double check. So keep the questions coming as we go throughout. If we got a chance to, we'll answer them live if it fits within the flow. And if not, we certainly have a space at the end. We can address some questions as we go. This is being recorded. So for those that are interested, we are certainly willing to share that as well as some resources from both Virsys12 and from ProviderTrust following the webinar today. So be on the lookout in your inboxes. You'll see a little bit more from both of our organizations, certainly this week, if not this afternoon. Kicking off, we have an amazing topic and session as we start our webinar calendar for this year. And we're just so fortunate to have an incredible partner join us as well. So if you know us, ProviderTrust, we'll do some intros in a second, but we're thrilled to have Tammy join us from Virsys12. Who's their founder and CEO. And we've got just a really relevant and timely topic to run through as well. Best-in-class provider network management in 2022, relevant certainly for payers, but also for provider organizations as well. We know we've got quite a mix of both payers and providers on the phone today. And so we'll be addressing both vantage points and viewpoints as we go on and get through the agenda today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here's what we're going to cover. We're going to go through some intros from a company perspective and also a people perspective. We have several clients and partners on the call today listening in. We've got a couple of new faces from each of our sides, from the ProviderTrust side and from the Virsys12 side, that we wanted to make sure you got a chance to say hello to. So we'll make sure we cover that. We are going to go through some new 2022 CMS Guidance and Regulations, specifically the No Surprises Act and some of the regulation that has gone effective January 1 of this year, what that means for provider network management, certainly for the payer side and for the provider side as well. We'll just anchor you to what's new and effective in the world today. What good looks like. I'm really excited for this. Tammy was gracious enough to do a podcast interview with us last year that was just fantastic on what to expect in 2022. This is a follow-up to that, is what does good look like as we tackle provider network management from Tammy's perspective. She's just a fantastic leader in this area in healthcare. And I'm thrilled for everybody listening in to be able to learn from her today. And then we're going to end with the ProviderTrust and Virsys12 approach. We are partners in this space. We work quite a bit together and we trust each other pretty deeply. And so it's a unique opportunity to have Tammy from Virsys12, Mike Worth from ProviderTrust, and Chris Redditch from ProviderTrust as well speak a little bit about how we play in this space, how we play in this world, and what our hopes and dreams are for 2022 and beyond. It's a bit about what we'll cover. Kicking it off today, I'm going to quickly intro ProviderTrust, and then I'm going to pass it to Tammy to intro Virsys12, so you can understand our vantage points, how we play in the world, and why it makes sense for us to even speak on this topic today. We like to say made with love in Nashville, Tennessee. If you're a ProviderTrust client, I know several of you are, and you've logged into any of our systems, you know that we say made with love in Nashville on the bottom of our products. That's a Chris Redditch staple. And if you hover over the heart, you'll see the music note pop out of it in any of our applications. And so it's what we've been saying for 12 years. We're certainly going to continue on. But if you get a chance, go ahead and log in and you can test it out if you don't believe me. And we know Virsys12 is in Nashville as well, too. So we're bringing you live from Nashville today. A little bit about us. Over a decade of experience coming to you live from Nashville with a focus solely in healthcare across the continuum of providers and payers. We monitor on a daily basis more than 5 million individuals, entities, and providers across employees, across large provider networks, and across vendor networks as well. We are experts in data integration and data science as it relates to provider data, and we're recognized and have been as the fastest growing software company in Tennessee. We've got some of the cool logos that we like to brag about on the left as being NCQA and SOC 2 certified as well. One last slide from ProviderTrust. If you don't know who we are and what we do, from healthcare license verifications and OIG exclusion checks to total compliance on the enterprise level, we deliver it all in one platform. There's a couple of things that we do on the bottom of the screen, but we believe deeply as an organization that a smarter healthcare indeed makes a safer healthcare. And so our belief is that if we can make healthcare just a little bit smarter today, we can make it a lot safer for everyone tomorrow. And that's a lot about what you hear us talk about on an ongoing basis. So I'll kick it over to Tammy at Virsys12, tell you a little bit about them and who they are.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, David. We are thrilled to be on this webinar today. We are, as David said, based in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and we started the company 10 years ago. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this past year. We are a healthcare technology firm that specializes in Salesforce technology stack. We also have an Amazon Web Services stack, but our whole, claim to fame is that we're transforming the business of healthcare. And so today we're going to talk to you specifically about technology that we have, the use cases we're solving for the provider lifecycle and provider network management, which is what you're interested in. And we feel that it's no longer optimal for any of us in healthcare, whether you're on the payer side or the provider side, to operate in silos. So we think we have a fairly unique and powerful story to tell about how we've partnered with ProviderTrust to eliminate the barriers that ultimately are barriers to care. If you think about it, we're all in this business to make sure that patients can seek care, and to do that, we should eliminate a lot of the administrative burden that we all have in doing our jobs every day. So that's a little bit about us. We do have an investment from Salesforce Ventures, if you're familiar with the Salesforce brand, and we won several awards for partner innovation in the healthcare space. Our two products are V12 Network and V12 IPD that we'll touch on a little bit today. So thank you.
And Tammy, we've got these two as well. I don't know if you wanted to save these for later or go a little bit deeper into the V12 network or the provider journey.
I'm not seeing the slide.
Ooh, let's see. We've got the V12 network. Is that showing up now?
No, you find the slides and I'll talk about it. Okay. So V12 network.
Dave, I could see the slide. It's on. Yeah.
Okay, good. So V12 network is an application that we started out with very, very early on to solve what we call the provider journey. And on the provider journey, everything from whether you're a health system or a payer, being able to solve provider onboarding. First, reaching out to these providers if you're a payer and getting them to sign up for your networks to really serve a patient population. So everything from provider onboarding to contracting to credentialing to ultimately creating all the data you need in the system to build and manage the provider network. So these are some of the things that we touch upon in our application. Many of you probably have a provider contracting system that's standalone, that's different from your provider credentialing system. You may have a separate provider portal or you may not have a provider portal at all. You may be faxing applications back and forth and doing email. You may have a totally separate system for your provider directory and keeping that up to date. Well, this is hard. This is hard to keep all this data going. And not only that, it makes people re-enter data from one system to the next, and we feel like there's a better way. So these are some of the things we do, some of the different types of use cases we solve in what we consider the provider lifecycle journey. And we do that with our product V12 Network. We also have a companion product called V12 IPD that is continually looking for changes in the provider profile. And that's a companion product to this. I think that the beauty of the relationship and the partnership that we have with ProviderTrust is all around provider network management. Many of you guys know that ProviderTrust is the leader in exclusion data. And, there's just no better source to go after and ensure that the providers that you're contracting with and you're putting in your network are not on these exclusion lists. We call it the naughty list. So one of the core components of our application has this online real-time integration with ProviderTrust that basically, while you're going through the process, because we're managing the process in our application, you're going through the process of managing the credentialing process, checking off a lot of things. You're doing background checks, you're checking for, where they practice, but you also have this process to go through and check for exclusions. And so we're able to do that real time with an API to ProviderTrust in our application, as well as if you are a customer of ProviderTrust for ongoing monitoring, we can actually hook that up as well. So lots of things to talk about in this specific area, but today we're going to focus on primarily, what does good look like, and what are the options you have available to you with both ProviderTrust and Virsys12, and just even operational things that you might need to be considering this year.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I wanted to say a couple of quick introductions as well to who we've got on the call, and then who we're actually going to bring on in just a second too. It's pretty rare for us at ProviderTrust to have our co-founders and sort of Chief Commercial Officer Mike Worth to join our webinars. It's a pretty unique thing, and I know Tammy, it's just even more special that Tammy's here today as well. Both of our organizations have added some talent along the way to help us really just understand how do we best position mutually to add the most value to clients and partners and friends in the industry too. And so today on the call, who you'll hear from is Chris Reddage, the co-founder of ProviderTrust. His vision continues to power us forward, from what we're doing in our products to how it can enable provider network, just the vision of better provider network management long term. And then I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Mike Worth, that you'll hear from today, as well as our Chief Commercial Officer, overseeing sales, marketing, our partnership strategy, our integration strategy, and how that all plays from how we deliver maximum value to the marketplace. And so those are the folks you'll hear from the ProviderTrust side. And certainly Tammy, the CEO and founder of Virsys12, is just such a thought leader both in healthcare and in the Nashville tech community as well, and just helps us all to understand this ecosystem of provider network data, how it all plays together, and how mutually can we build something really great moving into 2022 and beyond. And so I'm thrilled to have those three that you'll hear from today. We wanted to introduce a couple of faces too on the ProviderTrust and Virsys12 side that if you haven't had a chance to connect with, these are relatively newer faces from ProviderTrust. So I'll start on the very right, because I'm going to turn on the video for Bill and for Michael. But Clint is the VP of Sales and Solutioning at Virsys12, if you don't know who that is. Bill, I'm promoting to panelist, and we'll ask Bill to jump in first, and also Michael. Bill is just joining the ProviderTrust team. He's about a month in with the PT team as our VP of Payer Growth and Strategy. So Bill, I see you've popped on. Go off mute and just say hello. Tell a little bit about what your vision is for this year.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to meet you. Bill Barton, as Dave alluded to. Really looking forward to working with all of you as we're going forward and growing our footprint in the payer space. We have a significant opportunity with our partnership here with V12, and looking forward to hearing from you on how best we can serve your needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. And then we've got Michael Gardner as well, who I think is just a few days in on Virsys12. Tammy, tell me if I'm wrong, but Michael's going to jump on as well and just say a quick hello. Michael, looks like you're there too. Jump on, say hey.
Yep. Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm so excited to be part of Tammy's team. I'm 3 days in as her Chief Strategy Officer. And I have known Tammy for about 10 years. I was a client of hers and now I'm working with her. So excited. And I've been in healthcare for about 25 years and have had an interesting career where I've worked for physicians. I've been on the provider side with hospital systems and have spent the last 7 years really focused on value-based care and helping health systems across the nations move and transform their care. So a lot of experience with this new payer and provider partnership that we're interested in.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael. And a huge welcome to Bill and to Michael on both of our mutual teams. Friends, we thought it was appropriate. These are folks you'll hear a lot from if you work with us in any capacity. So felt it was appropriate just to give them a little bit of, make sure they had some space to say hello so you could associate some face with the name. Moving on, we'll get into the meat of it. Let's talk a little bit about what is now effective in January 1, 2022. This month, new CMS guidance, understanding what's new and effective. We wanted to anchor to this. If you've been following along with content from ProviderTrust and content from Virsys12, we've certainly both mutually published quite a bit on things like the interoperability, the interim rules that have come out from CMS, the No Surprises Act, some of the guidance that has come. Felt like we were doing this webinar in January. It was really appropriate to say some of this is now effective Jan 1. Let's take a minute, let's pause and make sure we're all anchored to what this means in our mutual worlds. Certainly at this point, we assume that many of the folks on the phone have not only been paying attention, but have been actively looking for ways to implement some of these best practices and strategies. We're going to mention so many of them here on the call today. And what is, to Tammy's point, what does good look like? But if this is net new to you, it's a chance for us to go through and say what has come out and what's now effective. So I've got two slides. The first one is the No Surprises Act. So December 27th of 2020, No Surprises Act was signed into law as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. The No Surprises Act, most of what's in here is addressing surprise medical billing at the federal level. That legislation is now effective January 1, 2022. There's a couple of highlights from the No Surprises Act that I've dropped in here. Protects patients from receiving surprise medical bills resulting from gaps in coverage for emergency services. Holds patients liable only for their in-network cost sharing amount while giving providers and insurers an opportunity to negotiate reimbursement, allows providers and insurers to access an independent dispute resolution process in the event disputes arise around reimbursement, requires both providers and health plans to assist patients in accessing healthcare cost information. Those are some of the big, broad highlights that we know may impact some of your operations, even if it's not necessarily compliance or provider network management directly. But as part of that legislation, there is a piece in there that talks about new requirements for provider directories and specifically provider directory accuracy. Section 116 of the No Surprises Act, which again is effective Jan 1, does set new requirements for both payers and providers that are now effective. On the payer side, health plans are required to verify provider information every 90 days, remove providers from the directory if they do not respond to requests for information, update the provider directory within 2 days of receipt of the information. On the provider side, required to submit to the health plan material changes to the content of the provider directory, and certainly a key source for so much of this is providers are certainly encouraged to update digital contact information in NPES to facilitate some of the care coordination data exchange. We're not going to get into the mechanics today of how all of that is accessible. Certainly we've seen such a push. If you've been following along on some of the interoperability standards, the push to access APIs and how to leverage APIs throughout the provider network journey and the provider lifecycle that Tammy outlined earlier. And so there's a lot more meat to this requirement and sort of the specifics of, and so what does this mean? We're going to shift the conversation now to talk about what good looks like in 2022, but certainly you will get a copy of these slides and we can even provide you with the primary source as well with these requirements from the No Surprises Act, just to make sure you have them in hand. And certainly if you've got questions, feel free to chime in the chat as well and we can address them as we go. And so now as we shift, we want to talk about really a conversation with Tammy, right? What is best in class? What does good look like in 2022 as it relates to provider network management? And so Tammy, to kick us off on this, the first question I have here is, why is this so important, right? To what degree does this impact providers, payers, why is it so critical? Certainly we understand the regulatory component that we just went through, but you alluded to it a little bit further, but what really is the impact of good provider data?
There's so many reasons. I mean, we could spend the whole webinar on this question alone, but at a high level, as I stated before, ultimately we're all here to serve the patient. The patient needs to know what providers are in network so that they don't get surprise bills, and so they can make good choices about the types of providers and the quality of those providers that they want to go to. And we all recognize healthcare is hard, it's difficult, it's a complicated business, and there is no magic bullet for fixing all these problems. But at the end of the day, with some of these new rules that are coming into place, and some of the other demands that are coming down for both payers and providers as relates to value-based care and how we manage these new payment models and building of networks, it's just not good enough to, refresh your data every 6 months, year, or whenever the provider tells you that, they've had a change. And I know the mandates only require 90 days, but in reality, I believe we're moving to a world where data needs to be updated all the time, continuously. And there's not enough people out there, even if we could hire them, to manually update data all the time and manually check data all the time. It's going to take technology and changes of processes and, and artificial intelligence and, tools to make our lives easier. So that we can ultimately not only meet these mandates, but be better organizations and have cleaner data and make our jobs a little more fulfilling. I mean, I don't know that anybody out there in the payer or the provider world that just wants to sit there all day long and update data in the database. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so what really well said. And the follow-up question to that is then, as we look to 2022, what are the keys to success? And so, I know you've spent so much time here figuring out how do we structure our organization and offering to help payers meet the keys to success. I'm curious, from your perspective, what are they?
So again, I say this with the utmost respect to everyone out there because it's complicated, and you can get on these webinars and people like me can spout off, oh, well, you should just do this. Well, it's not that easy. We all know that. But I think that every organization out there, both payers and providers, and what we call hybrid organizations, have to be looking for ways to eliminate silos of data, eliminate separate systems for credentialing versus onboarding versus provider directory, because there's no one out there in healthcare that doesn't want to do a good job, doesn't want to meet mandates, doesn't want to, ultimately serve members and patients. But it's almost impossible sometimes with the technical debt that we have and the silos of data that we have to make that happen. So, I think at a high level, looking at the things that the technical debt that you have that's no longer working for you, looking at the manual processes that are no longer working for you, because there is a lot of technology out there. Just like our solutions and the ProviderTrust solutions that can actually help organizations move faster with a lot of efficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you think about those keys to success, what are the necessary first steps for a payer or provider for where you typically see the market? What's a step 1, step 2 look like into 2022 to help meet that?
So inventorying where are you? How can you meet the mandates that are out there right now? And in order, meeting the mandates are one thing, but also how can you better serve your members and your providers and if you're a provider, you're going to better really collaborate with your payers and all the other constituents and even your own providers too, because they need help and support. I believe that we have a mission of transforming healthcare, but that mission for 2022 and beyond is to provide solutions that actually help providers and payers collaborate better together. And because only when that happens are we going to be able to meet some of these challenges with rising healthcare costs. I mean, mandates are one thing, but think about the rising healthcare cost and just the cost to operate our businesses. it's going to take collaboration, especially as we move into value-based care.
Yeah, absolutely. Tammy, I got two more questions for you. The first one is on the new CMS guidance on directory accuracy. Excuse me. And the other, we've talked about this in the past, but interoperability and some of the guidance around there. What's the goal of these, and what does it tell us about where we're moving to as a healthcare ecosystem?
Well, it's about sharing. And, in healthcare, we have HIPAA laws, we have all kinds of things that make it a little complicated to share. But again, just like we have siloed systems in our organization, if you think about it, if you're going to collaborate with other organizations, you have to break down silos as well and be able to share data securely, obviously. And so I think that's key to being able to meet those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question I have for you, and then we'll move into some of like how does this come to life in both of our worlds as well, is just what are some of the most important things for a payer and or a provider to keep in mind for this upcoming year, either on the regulatory side or on breaking down data silos, just anything that's really important for an organization to keep in mind for this year to achieve best in class?
So I would say every year healthcare is changing, but this year it's changing faster. It appears, not only based on the new rules and regulations coming out from CMS, but just basically because of the trends that are coming down the pike. So most of us like it when we have a process that we think is working. And I think everything is going to be turned upside down a little bit, and we have to reevaluate, what have we done in the past? Is that really working for us moving forward? And not only that, what does the future look like? I think it's very important to consider what is healthcare going to look like, not only this year, but the 2023, 4, 5, and beyond. And we have to be prepared for those things coming down the pike. Otherwise, we're kind of all in this together, and it'll be even more difficult than it is. And we already know that healthcare is a difficult business to be in. So there's some things we can do now to really prepare for when we have more networks, more narrow networks, more contracts with payers, different contracts, both a combination of fee-for-service contracts and value-based care contracts. Every organization on the call today, probably you're getting into not only new lines of business, but new markets. Mm-hmm. And each one of those markets have new regs and rules and requirements that you have to have. So, as I've said before, I just can't highlight enough how you can't throw more people at the problem. We really have to throw smart processes and technology at the problem.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's fantastic. Tammy, I'm so grateful for you jumping on, sharing your perspective. I know that both Virsys12 and ProviderTrust are actively every day looking at how do we take what best in class looks like in theory and then make it reality for the market and build towards that mutual vision. And so I wanted to transition just for a second and talk a little bit about Virsys12 and ProviderTrust and the mutual visions and some of the perspectives that are coming really from Tammy and also from Chris as the leader of ProviderTrust as well. And so Chris, I'll turn to you and just say the visions for why we've partnered with Virsys12 and what we aim to achieve in the provider network space.
Yeah, Dave, first, it's good to see everyone. And just so you know, Dave has COVID right now, and he's doing an amazing job. I know we all are struggling with it across the country, but here's another example of just someone who's working through it. He's got a house full of COVID, but doing a great job. So I just want to honor you, Dave, in that. The big thing for me when I started ProviderTrust was about relationships. Right, we want to have great relationships both internally with our team, externally with our clients, and then begin to develop partnerships where we have great relationships. And so, as Dave shared in the beginning, Made with Heart in Nashville, like the heartbeat of what we do is relationships. And so we wanted a real big first partnership to be with someone who I trust and someone who's doing amazing work in the provider payer space. And really innovative from that. So I've known Tammy for quite some time, and we started talking about this 2 or 3 years ago. And this is really an example of us leveraging some new technologies. We have a new API that they're they're leveraging. We're continuing to update that API, but we wanted to develop a relationship and really come to market with someone who we trusted that's doing great work in the space. So that's ultimately why we chose to partner with Virsys12 and Tammy. Why the provider, the payer market, right? For the first 10 to 15, or I guess 10 years, we've been known as ProviderTrust. We're big in hospitals. We're monitoring, 5 million individuals. But the reality is, our largest clients are in the payer world. And so about 2 years ago, we really went to work developing a product specifically for the payer market, and said, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to transition our clients off our existing products into a new platform. And out of that came this API that we've been able to partner with Tammy on. And so that's really, number one, relationships. Number two, we're moving into this payer market. We've been in it for the last 10 years. And again, our largest clients are in the market. And then three, we've really we've made our name in our data. We think about data differently. We think about how to connect different pieces of data. If you provide us with an NPI, we can tell you instantaneously whether it's active, whether it has an exclusion, and if there's sanctions a part of that. And so the way we think about data is not only do you need to have good software, but you also have to have good data. And that's why this partnership works, is because Tammy is focused with Salesforce and all the custom development they've done, plugging in our data, then creates all the efficiencies that Tammy has talked about. So that's really the focus. We're super excited to be able to work with you, Tammy, on this. And I know we have some current clients that we're doing this with that are on the call today. So thanks for believing in us, and we're excited about the next couple of years with this.
Tammy, wanted to give you a sense to just talk and share your side of it, right? About the vision for this.
So, if you learn a little more about what we've done as a company at Virsys12, we started solving problems in healthcare early on. And then we found that there was a repeatable solution we could bring to market with our products, V12 Network and V12 IPD. And at the core, our products are workflow process engines that help manage that process of provider lifecycle management. And we're not a data company, but to actually have a great process, you have to have great data. And so that's why we decided to partner with ProviderTrust. And, the reality is, at this point in time, we feel like the combination of our products and the ProviderTrust products are very unique in the market, because we're bringing in the most rich data that you have on exclusion and provider profile information into what we feel is one of the strongest workflow process engines that you can have to manage provider network management. And to add to the fact that our product is built on top of the Salesforce Health Cloud platform, we've got the backing of a industry leader in healthcare CRM functionality. And we've taken that and extended it to have all the functionality you need to, manage the provider network and produce the directory. So we're continuing to innovate. ProviderTrust is continuing to innovate to stay ahead of not what are the requirements this year, but where are the requirements going to be in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And so we feel really good about the fact that because we're focused on either the data or the process in this area, that we're going to be ahead of the game for all of our customers.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to turn the mic over to Mike Worth. Mike Worth is our Chief Commercial Officer. So much of what we've covered today is a key to success is not just understanding that you have processes in place for managing the frequency of verification and staying on top of it from a process perspective, but also the data and what are you verifying against, and how well do you understand the world and the data science that's powering provider directories, provider directory accuracy, provider networks as a whole, both par and non-par. And so I wanted to turn it over to Mike Worth just to tell you a little bit about how we're managing and sizing up the data on our side? What does that look like from our perspective, and what do we see? Because from our standpoint, the better that we understand the world of provider data, the better that we can actually enable smarter, best-in-class provider network management. So I'll kick it to you, Mike, just to really take us through the data science side of this.
Thanks, Dave. And great to talk to everyone again here. Many familiar names are on this call today. And a big part of why I know Dave asked me to join us today is because I've also spent the last several years operating as our provider network practice leader. And in doing so, you start to have a great deal of empathy for what we're up against collectively in the reality of trying to make these types of transformations that Tammy and that Chris have been laying out for us today. You know, I don't know if anybody here was with us when we were on some of the early calls relative to the preclusion list. But in the very early going, when we were test driving and exploring some of how is this going to work, and open comment and open feedback is coming through, literally the interaction was around, well, how do we evaluate? How do we know if a practitioner is a part of the preclusion list? And the response initially was, well, just enter in the NPI, and then you'll get a return result that'll tell you if they're on the preclusion list or not. And there was just dead silence in the call. And then someone was brave enough to raise their hand and say, we have 1.2 million NPIs that we're supposed to do this with every month. So the theory and the reality that we're all up against, and not just on the preclusion list, but with so many of the naughty lists, Tammy, like you talked about, so many of those different areas to be able to try to explore, to try to find out, to try to connect or tap into, that ultimately relates to provider eligibility, that then can be powered by a system that Tammy's talking about that can then fuel or inform all of these other operating systems inside of these organizations. The external pressures to be able to create that, the forces always seem stacked against us. There are primary sources to verify that are literally PDFs today. We live in a world where, Tammy mentioned faxes earlier today. I can deposit a check with my phone on an airplane today, but we have to fax a credential for a healthcare provider that's trying to look out and take care of our patients. So the cognitive disconnect is significant, and it's going to breed this notion of haves and have-nots in and around the space. And to try to cut down on that, or to try to bridge that gap, is something that's so challenging for everyone on this call to be able to navigate, because we're up against the inertia of our own organizations as well. Silos, see, I'm from Nebraska, so I can speak to this. Silos are very effective at holding corn and grain and things like that and keeping them in one space. But they don't operate well when you need to be able to move these things across. So these functional silos that we've created inside of our organizations make it near impossible for anyone to solve this problem collectively. It's going to take individuals inside of these organizations that are going to hold a flag or be a champion that's going to say, I can step forward. I need to be able to raise the banner of awareness around this and say, here's what's possible, because that's what's going to enable these haves and separate the have-nots. We worked with a regional payer organization and made the decision 2 years earlier in the process that, yes, this is how we want to go solve this, but could not find functional ownership or responsibility. Now, is that a failure of leadership? Is that a failure of accountability? Is that a failure of systems? It's probably a combination of all the above. Thankfully, they've been able to move forward, been able to advance, but it's not been without a lot of difficulty, challenge, and issue that we know you all run into. So it's not just the internal or the external issues, it's the internal ones as well. Now, we can't solve all of your internal issues for you. We'll do our best, and we'll be thought leaders, and we'll stick our necks out there a little bit. But what we can do is talk a little bit to Dave's point about how we try to solve some for eligibility. So briefly, there's a couple of things I want to highlight, Dave. One is just around, yeah, go ahead, you can advance, please, thanks. Or did you give me the power?
You don't have the power. I got you.
All right, I never do. But what we can do is help organizations find fraud, inaccuracies, or other discrepancies that others can't. that's really going to help to drive that level of provider eligibility. So if you think about that system that you want to tap into, think about Tammy, think about what's going to inform that data inside of that system. We're going to be able to help bring that in. That's going to generate real cost savings for not only a plan, but also for any type of operating provider network. Go ahead, Dave. The way that we do that is pretty interesting because we can find stuff. And the difference is really, you can check a box or you can help solve the problem. So with one very large payer organization, but just think large provider network across 2 different states. So we looked at and investigated providers across 2 different states, reduced these down to find unique practitioners. And yes, almost 150,000 providers. These are not entities, these are individuals. We were able to go in and on an instant verification, just like Chris was speaking to earlier, an instant verification utilizing the NPI only as the record, we were able to identify 3,000 providers that had a total of $14 million in claims that went out affiliated with those providers that had some issue. They were somehow, way, shape, or form on the naughty list, okay? This is only 2 states. It was over a 12-month period of claims that had come in. The kicker on all of this is that that organization had every system, every process in place where they were evaluating provider eligibility ahead of time. The mousetrap just wasn't engineered as such to be able to catch what was really solving the problem, as opposed to feeling like that function had checked the box. And that's the biggest difference. The way that we can help do that, go ahead, Dave, is, and we're going to skip ahead just a little bit, Dave, because I want to be respectful of everyone's commitment here today, is because a lot of what happens is that we can do things in our world like automate monitoring that helps to reduce the problem. What ProviderTrust is doing is actually taking those sources and enriching those sources with additional identifiers. We found a practitioner as a part of that population that had for years operated inside of that provider network. But because we were able to triangulate with the data that was available at the primary source, we brought in our own enrichment of social security number and NPI that was not at the OIG exclusion source, built that in and could instantly verify and return that result, that exact match result, which you'll often hear. That level of accuracy is what any type of system with the right type of data fueling it can actually deliver back for you. Well, that's going to eliminate things like potential matches or being able to search when we have limited data, which we do. These are referral networks that we're working with. These are non-par networks. We have limited data by definition, and we know that. We have incomplete resources that we're supposed to tap into. We know that. So we're proactively enriching that, not reactively doing so. What that helps us to do is not just eliminate the false positives. Lots of places can help extol the virtues of a methodology that eliminates a false positive. What you should be concerned about today are the false negatives. Those sleeping beasts, like the provider that I talked about earlier, Dr. Rios, who was inside of that network, that we're not aware of today, that are actually excluded. We just can't actually triangulate the data because we don't have the technology to do so. Those false negatives are what make us sleep at night, but that when we wake up on a Wednesday morning to one in our inbox is when our world crumbles around us. Well, there's other elements that go along with it, but all of these combine to help eliminate that level of risk. And that's really what our data science, our monitoring science, and our methodology is powering or enabling. So Dave, if you want to skip to the last slide, I'll close this out and then let you wrap up and we can take some questions here with our thank you, Dave. What it allows us to do and the outcomes we can help generate, well, it allows us to map to the state and federal exclusions, and we can do so live. We can we're doing this every day. We're checking primary sources. Every day we're enriching primary source data and allowing that to move into our engines that helps them to take your data and connect or bounce up against what do we have so that we can return that exact result. The entirety of that OIG exclusion list we have enriched. We've reviewed every single one, and where applicable, added or enriched every one of those exclusions. We have clients today that we're doing monitoring for primary sources. We've talked a lot about exclusions today. We actually monitor the primary sources, the artifact, the license, the thing that, whether it could be CLIA or DEA or any type of other primary source artifact, that we need to go to the primary source, grab that, bring it back into our environment, extract different data elements from it, and populate our systems. We can go grab that today because we are mapped to 99% of those primary sources that exist in nature. There's a few of them that we'll continue to find that pop up, especially when it gets to like music therapy and some things like that that we haven't found, but we continue to add those to our rosters as they show up in our own networks. We've added clients because so many of our other competitors have actually lost the ability to map directly to those primary sources or cannot keep up with the technology, where we have stayed far out in front of it, so much so that even through COVID, we were changing those primary source requirements. We were able to stay on top of it. We have 50% more NPIs affixed to those primary sources. And the net of all of this is that those issues, those places where you have items on a license or on with an exclusion or any other type of primary source that you're trying to verify, on average, we find 40% more of those issues when we first launch with a client. Now that can be scary to some people initially, but that goes back to the same question, which is, would you rather check the box or would you rather get it right? And to kind of put a bow on our conversation today, if we end with where we started, right? If we're trying to get it right, we're doing so not just because that's our job, but because we have a responsibility and accountability to the healthcare ecosystem and take care of the patients and families that we're serving. So that's a little bit around that, Dave, and hopefully that helps to bring us home in our conversation today.
Friends, thank you so much. We're about at time, and so I wanted to quickly recap and close this out here. We covered quite a bit today, so we'll make sure it all gets into y'all's hands. And thank you again so much. Not one person has dropped off this call this entire time, which is amazing. And so thanks for sticking with us and staying on. We covered some updates from CMS, things that are now effective. And so I want to let's anchor to what we need to do. And then what we spent a lot of today is talking about not just what we need to do to check the box, but what we ought to do to stay accountable to patients and the organizations that we serve. Certainly the conversation with Tammy is a fantastic one. It's recorded. I'd highly encourage you to go back and give it a listen as well as some of the slides and some of the material from Virsys12 and how they approach provider networks. And then ProviderTrust as a data provider and how we engineer thoughtful, intuitive responses to help enable the Virsys12 platform in a small way. And so that is, I hope that some of this resonated with you all. You will get some of the materials from both Virsys12 and from us. Both of us, we are mutually thrilled to be able to work with each other. We trust each other. And we've got some big mutual ambitions going into this year and beyond. So thanks for listening, friends. And if you've got questions, please feel free to reach out to either of us on the Virsys12 side or on the ProviderTrust side. And with that, that's it. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. We will talk to you soon. Tammy, Chris, Mike Worth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Feel better, my friend.
I will.